So, Game of Thrones Season 8, Episode 6, The Iron Throne has come and it's gone. The series is now over. The internet can finally breathe. It felt suffocating over the span of these past 5 weeks because having an honest conversation about the show seemed entirely difficult in any form of social media. So many people out there were just so quick to crap on the show without ever giving it any bit of critical thought. And I've seen this quite a bit, and I've defended the show a great deal, and I'm not going to stop that right now. This is my honest thoughts, my honest conclusion to last night's show. I'm satisfied with where things were, but it took me a little bit of time to get there because I had to sit and process what I saw. I had to sit and process what happened, and I had to come up with my own conclusion to it, my own thoughts on it. And honestly, it kind of felt a little bit like The Last Jedi, where I saw The Last Jedi and I was not happy with what I saw. So I came home and I ranted about it quite a bit. And I still to this day don't like the movie, but I saw it again about a week after the fact, and I was more apathetic to it than I was previously because my expectations were no longer there. I already knew what was going to happen. Now I could focus on the finer details of the film. And I say this in regards to the Iron Throne, the series finale, because I just saw it again. I watched it again, and I have to say, as far as a series finale is concerned, it was quite on point with a lot of the rest of the show. This was a series finale that was never, ever, 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 ever going to be a universally praised series finale. And the thing is, the show creators know that, not because they're hacks or they're terrible writers, but because they know that there's a very big devoted fan base to the most popular show in the world. There would be no way for you to please everybody. So they did what they felt was best for the show. They did what they felt was best for the characters. And George R. R. Martin was a story consultant all the way through. So this was his story that he told them. This was his story that he gave to them a few years ago. This is the culmination, the conclusion of what he put out there. I just want to make that abundantly clear because people tend to forget that, and they put all the hatred on Dan and Dave, who ultimately really did the best that they could with the material that they were given. You can't always polish a turd, to be fair. It's not that the show was bad. It's that they had a lot they're building up to, and they ended up taking it in the direction they best felt would give a solid conclusion. And after watching the episode again, I have to say it was a very solid conclusion. I have complaints with it. I have a fair amount of complaints with it because, and I'm not going to lie, I built up my own expectations. I did a predictions video that was like, it was pretty much wrong. The whole thing was wrong, right? And so as I was watching the episode last night with my dad, there were things I thought were going to happen that never happened. There were things that I thought were going to take place that never took place. They zigged when I thought they were going to zag. And as a result, my initial thought was, okay. But then as I came home and I did a 2.5 hour live stream on it last night, and I talked to my friend Habib about it, and we spent a good amount of time discussing it, and I read your guys' comments, and I started thinking more about it, and I watched it again. I've changed my opinion on it. It's not the greatest thing ever. It's a satisfying conclusion to a story that was probably never going to have a satisfying conclusion. Would I have put Bran on the throne? No, I wouldn't have put Bran on the throne. I still don't necessarily like that decision, but I get it because at the end of the day, this is all about politics, right? The entire series, the medieval porn, is still about politics. Politics always take place, but the politics aren't always good. Go back to Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. We talk a lot of crap about the whole Trade Federation and the blockade around Naboo as being, the catalyst that brought the Jedi to the planet, you know what I mean? Like, and set them on the course to go and find Anakin. Like, still, the trade blockade is an odd one 20 years later, but it was politics. Lucas was attempting to pull a politics card, and he maintained that all the way through the prequels. The prequels were very much about politics, the Federation dealing with the Republic dealing with the Trade Federation, dealing with the Sith and the Jedi. There was a lot of politics that went into that particular series of films, and there's a lot of politics that happened here. In fact, if you go back to the scene with the Council and choosing Bran to be the king and Bran's choices to send Jon to the Night's Watch, knowing that the Night's Watch was no more, knowing that the Night's Watch was created as a way to fight back against the wildlings and the Night King, and those are now neither problems because the Night King is dead and the wildlings are like pretty much BFF with everybody in, you know, in the north. There's not an issue there anymore. There's no need for a Night's Watch. So he basically just submitted something that was a known tradition, and knowing that Jon would have no reason to stay there and Jon would leave. Like there was that. He set that in motion. Ultimately, it was politics. And he says as much. He's like, look, Grey Worm wanted your head. And since nobody bothered to tell anyone about who Jon's lineage was, at the end of the day, they kept that secret, but that secret ultimately prevented a war. That secret prevented more bloodshed. Jon didn't want the Iron Throne. He never wanted it, even to take it reluctantly. He didn't want the power. And so at the end, when it was apparent that this would have been an easy out for everything, it actually wasn't. It would have caused another war, and all the Northerners outside of King's Landing would have then fought the Unsullied, and we would have found ourselves in a greater, bloodier battle that was resolved, or well, really squashed before it could begin, by using politics. And that was a lot of what happened in the show. A lot of everything that went down was all politics based. And I thought that was actually really fascinating that they were able to kind of bring the show back to where it began in that last shot, and show Jon heading off beyond the wall into wildling country and seeing even one blade of grass coming through the tundra, signaling that winter was over, that the Night King was no longer a threat, and all those things. I thought it was very kind of apropos for what the series was trying to convey in that moment. Now, were there things that they could have done differently, like make sure water bottles in the council scene didn't make it in the shots a couple times? 100%. That's a quality control aspect. That's what you call a script supervisor. They done goofed on that one, but their job predominantly is more continuity for the script, but they still failed. I think they really failed on that particular front. I would have liked to have seen some different character endings. I would have liked Jon and Sam to get a farewell, considering that it's his best friend, but their farewell is probably more in the Last of the Starks, before heading off to King's Landing, when he talks to him and Gilly. Gilly wasn't even in that. We don't know if Gilly made her way to King's Landing after the fact for Sam to become the Grand Miser, although I'm pretty sure that she did. And he was still one of the now the Torley house. He was, or the Tully house. He was in charge of that. And so there's a lot. No, the Torley. So yeah, there's a lot of things there. I would have liked some more interpersonal scenes between some of the characters, but what we got, I think, worked out well. Bronn had, I think, the best scene in the entire episode at the small council, showing where they were going to be going, and that, Davos is giving him all sorts of shit for his name. I thought was great. And like Brienne writing everything about Jaime in the book, she gave this man she loved a fitting end. History is written by the victors, and she wrote Jaime's story so hundreds, thousands of years down the road, people would look back on Sir Jaime Lannister and they would see who he truly was, not who he believed he was, not who he at the end felt that was only thing that mattered to him was Cersei and everything else. And so she kind of rewrote his history that I felt was something only a person who truly loves somebody else would do. And I like that. And that was a callback to season 4 when they were in King's Landing and looking at the White Book and everything else. I thought that was great. I really did enjoy Arya going west. At first I was a little bit kind of like, what? And then of course that harkens back to season 5 when she's talking with the actress, and the actress says, they're talking about where she would go when it's all over. And she says, well, what's west of Westeros? And the lady's like, I got no idea. And she's like, well, that's where the maps end. And so she heads off in that direction to, Arya the Explorer, which I think a lot of people now want that to be its own series, and I completely agree. And I like that she had a ship with the Stark family banner on it, and I like that she went off in that direction. We don't know where her story takes her, but will she eventually come back to Winterfell or to the Westeros? We have no idea. But what we do have is potentially a potential setup for the next 10 years, if they want to come back to the show to fight Bran the Broken. And that was something that was subtle in the back end of it that I thought was very interesting. They kind of established that Bran was perhaps the villain all along, or the Three-Eyed Raven was particularly the villain all along, because the Three-Eyed Raven we never really established was a good guy. We know that he was opposed to the Night King and the Night King hated him, and that was really about it. But we don't know if he was a good guy or not. We just kind of assumed that. But at the episode, or before that, Bran had said, like, I'm no longer Bran, I'm the three-eyed raven. And then they start referring to him as Bran the Broken. And when Tyrion asks him if he wants to become king, and he was like, well, why do you think I came all this way? At first, my literal response was, oh, fuck you, man. Like, I didn't like that at first at all. But then the more I thought about it, the more he starts kind of seeing like the wheels in motion and how they were establishing all of these things through little lines of dialogue and little subtle actions here and there. And it really does feel that Bran had positioned himself to become king, and potentially because he wanted it. We have no idea. But then Tyrion says to Jon, come back in 10 years and we'll see how this whole thing played out. And that's kind of an open invitation to come back to the franchise in 10 years in order to see whether or not it actually is good. Westeros is profitable or prosperous and the people there are happy, people in the Six Kingdoms, or will there be another rebellion? And I have no idea. We know there's multiple spin-off shows in the works at HBO. We have one, it's a prequel series that's in works right now that's going to be coming out probably next year, which makes a lot of sense. And at the end of the day, I can fully see why people are not happy with the series finale. That's why I wanted to go back and watch it again, and I wanted to kind of refresh my memory and some of the shows, the previous episodes, previous seasons, to get an idea for what they were culminating. Yes, there were plot holes or plot threads that were never wrapped up. There was, the question of whether or not Tyrion is a Targaryen, which I really thought they were going to answer in this episode when Tyrion thought he was going to be burned alive by Drogon, and I thought that was going to be the moment. That never freaking happened. That never happened at all. My expectations were definitely subverted on that front. But when it comes to Daenerys' death, that was something a lot of people had issues with. I actually really liked it because of the conversation between Tyrion and Jon. When Tyrion's explaining to Jon, exactly what Daenerys had done. And then Jon quips back with, and you were there advising her. And he was like, yeah, I made a mistake. He's like, I backed the wrong horse. I burned my best friend to ashes. And when I die, his ashes will tell my ashes, see, I told you. Understanding that he had made those mistakes and that he had definitely not wanted to go that way. But understanding that this is just the reality that he chose, and this is the consequences of what he had done. And I thought that was great because he was trying to convince Jon, like, look, I know you love her. I love her too. You were more successful than I was. But what's going to happen when she comes for your sisters? They're not going to bend the knee. And you can, look to see out there what happened. And then Jon went to Dany and he tried to plead with her. He's like, have you been out there? Have you seen the children, the little children burned? And then Dany, and this is where I feel Emilia Clarke had really good acting in the episode, because when she was confronted both times, the first time by Tyrion, her response is, she tells Grey Worm to take him. But if you look subtly, you see her that flash of what she did, that realization that somebody's calling her out for the monster that she's become. But then that goes away. It just very quickly fades. And then she's the queen, knowing that she can't show weakness, knowing that she can't be questioned on these sort of things. And she wants to take off Tyrion. And then, of course, when Jon says, people out there are dead, children are burned. And she was like, Cersei left me no choice. And that's not true at all. Like, she knows that's not true, but Daenerys has never taken responsibility for anything she's ever done. She's only known violence and death. She's only known these things, and she never took the responsibility. And I believe it was in that moment when Jon was saying, please spare Tyrion. Okay, please spare him. Mercy is the way. We can make this work with mercy. And she was like, no, that you can't rely on little mercies. But once we're done conquering the world, we'll be able to rebuild it in our image. It wasn't just getting the Seven Kingdoms. When she went on to the world domination plot, that's kind of the end of Dany. But I really liked that in that moment, Jon made that call, and he had to get her in close and lower her guard, and he killed her. And it wasn't like a drawn out death, which I really appreciate. It wasn't a drawn out death at all. She just died. And then, Drogon shows up and burns the Iron Throne. And people out there were complaining about that. I'm like, look, that was a symbolic thing. That was a metaphor. It wasn't a literal representation. But if you listen to the conversation that Dany had, with John before then about the Iron Throne. That was always the point of corruption. It was whoever sat on it was, it was like the One Ring in Lord of the Rings. And there's a lot of references to Lord of the Rings in this one, a lot of Return of the King moments in this episode. And that was a bit of a detriment, to be fair. Like, as much as I love Lord of the Rings and I love Peter Jackson's movies, this one, it really, really referenced that in a couple of key ways, and I did feel that was a bit unnecessary. Having the book be called A Song of Ice and Fire, the whole like people leaving, going into the new world, and everything else. There was a bit there that I believe they could have not done. But at the same time, when you're dealing with this with a wrap up show like this, you are giving everyone their finale. I think a lot of people wanted it to be a violent finale, a bloody finale. And in the end, only one person died. And that was fascinating to me, that only, and you had the Lannister soldiers, but only one key character died. And so the more I think about it, the more I look at what the D&D crafted throughout the season. Did it need to be longer and stretched out 100%? Should have had like 2-3 more episodes in order to really kind of bring it home. I think I wish they would have done that, but this is what we have as fans. And as a fan of the show, that's been a fan of the show since 2011 when it came out, I am satisfied with the ending. My dad and I had to talk about it after the episode was over, and we both agreed. We're glad that it's over. It's just, that was a story. Now we're done with that story and we can move on to something else now. And I really hope that in the next 5-6 years that people, when they get the full set on home video and they rewatch the series, that this last season gets a little bit more love as time goes on, that we're not completely marred down by the initial reactions to it, and that the reactions are just reactions. They're a gut reaction, not entirely one that is based on actually thinking about and processing what we've seen. And I think that ultimately was one of the things that hindered the reporting on the series or on the season. I think people were ultimately looking for it to fail, and I think that did have an impact on the public discourse. This isn't a situation like The Last Jedi, where the movie, or Ghostbusters, where the movie did come out and it was a bit of a failure. Well, failures in general. And then, of course, you had the talent behind the scenes really coming out and attacking the fan base. Some people criticized the petition, and that's really about it. But ultimately, this is a different scenario. This isn't one movie that's part of a very beloved franchise. This is the finale of a very beloved franchise, and one that was always going to have this type of contentious ending. But my personal take on it, after again sleeping on it, watching it again, and absorbing it, is we got a very satisfying ending to it in a way that didn't satisfy everyone, but I think closed the door enough to go, okay, it's done, and we can still go back and re-experience all of our favorite moments and know that at the end of the day, the bad guys lost, the good guys won, supposedly, in case Bran the Broken becomes, crazy later on. And we got a show that was unprecedented, unlike anything else we'd ever seen on television before. And I'm totally cool with the way it wrapped up. And I'm excited to see what happens next. But now I'm also excited for the next show that comes along and captivates society the way that this one has, and to watch it get meticulously torn apart, because that's always how these things operate. So it's just another episode of a show like this that is always going to have that particular response. Anyway, my rambling is done. What do you guys think about this one here? I'm sure the comments are going to be pretty fascinating. They're going to be very interesting. There will be spoilers, although if you made it this far, you probably got spoilers. So there we have it on that front. And I'll talk to you guys later. Have yourself a great day. Thumbs up the video if you want. Doubt many of you will. But have a good one, and peace out.